We decided to approach the International Court of Justice to set forth the case of our belief that genocide. I've seen in many images the women of Palestine and how they are struggling, how they cry for their children, and our own mothers in South Africa in the course of the apartheid struggle had similar experiences. You belong to a country called South Africa. There's a terrible oppressive system there called apartheid, and we are currently fighting it. Many of our leaders, of our cadres, of our freedom fighters lost their lives. That President Mandela said that South Africa would not be completely free until Palestine is free. We wish all the neighborhood of Palestine ensure, as we benefited in South Africa from our neighborhood, that the people of Palestine benefit from their entire neighborhood as well. We appreciate the efforts being made, strenuous efforts by the leadership of Qatar. All of us need to be offended at what we are seeing today, and that offense must lead to action. My name is Naledi Pandor, and I'm the daughter of Fikile and Joe Matthews. My father, Joe Matthews, was active in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. He was a senior leader within the African National Congress, firstly in its youth league and then the ANC body itself. He was active along with his father, interestingly, my grandfather, Professor Z.K. Matthews, who is renowned in South Africa for having been the person who proposed that the ANC should set in motion a process to craft a freedom charter which would set out the aspirations of the people of South Africa as to the future post-apartheid South Africa that they wished to create. That document would be able to tell the world what it is that the South African people desire. And following his proposal at a conference in the Eastern Cape of the African National Congress, a process was begun of an active national campaign going from village to village, town to town, speaking to community members, asking them to submit proposals for this Freedom Charter. People wrote on pieces of paper in meetings, they wrote letters in, others petitions, all setting out their desire for what essentially became the Freedom Charter adopted of 1955, but then the Bill of Rights of the future free South Africa, and incorporated at times exactly the words of the clauses in the Freedom Charters, and in other aspects with some alterations. But essentially that document became a core component of the constitution of a democratic South Africa and shaped, I think, the kind of society we're trying to build today. My dad and my grandfather are famous in the political lexicon of South Africa for having been a son and his father in the famous treason trial of South Africa, where over 150 of our leaders were arrested and charged with treason, largely due to these national campaigns and particularly this crafting of a Freedom Charter. They were charged with treason. There was a long trial in the apartheid courts, and eventually the apartheid state could not prove the allegation of treason, and all 159 treason trialists were released. There's a famous picture of all of them, And somewhere in the middle are my dad and my grandfather sitting next to each other. So that is the history that I come from. As children, our father was an absent father working for the movement and for our freedom in South Africa. So the person in charge was our mother. And it is due really to my mother's commitment to us that I have come to appreciate the role of women in struggle and the power of our mothers to ensure that even in the most difficult circumstances, they hold our families together. I've seen in many images the women of Palestine and how they are struggling, how they cry for their children. And our own mothers in South Africa, in the course of the apartheid struggle, had similar experiences. So my mother was a driver in me appropriating the notion that women are equal to everybody, because they have the power to change our families, our communities, our societies. Growing up in exile taught me to accept difference and diversity. And it is that appreciation of diversity that I love about South Africa. But also being in exile, you got a lot of political education. You were taught that although you are out of your country, you belong to a country called South Africa. There's a terrible oppressive system there called apartheid, and we are currently fighting it. But as many of our parents and our leaders said, there will be freedom in our lifetime. Many of our leaders, of our cadres, of our freedom fighters lost their lives, but we know the contribution that all of them made. And as children, we were always taught, don't forget your country, appreciate the need to fight injustice, ensure that when you are free, you address the matter of equality, of non-racism, of non-sexism, and of inclusion of all people. Our assertion as South Africa in the international domain of the importance of human rights and also the importance of international law and international human rights law being applied equally to all nations, to all countries, to all peoples. It is because of this belief that South Africa decided, in the instance of the horrible October onslaught against the people of Palestine, that we decided to approach the International Court of Justice, one of the bodies of the United Nations, to set forth the case of our belief that genocide was the intention behind the onslaught against the people of Palestine in the occupied Palestinian territory. I wish to begin by thanking the judges of the International Court of Justice for dealing with this matter expeditiously. Given the urgency of the need to protect innocent civilians in Palestine and to ensure that the harm that South Africa has referred to in the case it brought before the ICJ, that harm is addressed and that people's lives are saved. The saving of life is not merely with respect to having a ceasefire, it's to ensuring that humanitarian aid is provided to those who need support, as well as ensuring that the state of Israel, which is currently the occupier and administrator in Palestine, provides the necessary basic services that the residents of Gaza and the West Bank require. We had found that international law has failed the people of Palestine over many, many decades, and that the time had come to place Israel before the global public court so that the world could see for themselves the injustice that was being really wielded against the people of Palestine. I've always told public audiences in South Africa that the African National Congress, which has been the major party in South Africa since the inception of democracy, has a long-standing association with the people of Palestine, because the people of Palestine were part of that international solidarity movement that supported us in the anti-apartheid struggle. So when we were striving for freedom, the Palestinian people, who were even at that time oppressed, stood with us and helped us where they could. So it's a long-standing relationship. It is because of that long-standing relationship that President Mandela said in his major foreign policy address as a new president of a free South Africa, that South Africa would not be completely free until Palestine is free. This statement of President Mandela remains in the ANC as a legacy directive, that we have a duty to continue our support, our solidarity, until the people of Palestine achieve their freedom.
We are following in the footsteps of Nelson Mandela, who said to us and who taught us that our freedom will not be complete until the freedom of the Palestinians is also achieved.
So I think that that case brought by South Africa was a very important moment of highlighting the necessity of respect for international law, but also that to care for another people, you don't have to live next door to them. That the value of international solidarity, which we benefited from in the struggle against apartheid, was a solidarity that we have to bring to bear in support of the suffering people of Palestine. And it is our hope that this war is going to come to an end and that the people of Palestine are going to finally enjoy freedom, human rights, and justice. We wish the same too for the people of Israel, but we cannot countenance oppression of one state against another people. Our own impetus as South Africa on conflict is that we must always find peace and we should negotiate to end conflict. So we appreciate the efforts being made, strenuous efforts by the leadership of Qatar. We wish all the neighborhood of Palestine would join in these efforts and ensure, as we benefited in South Africa from our neighborhood, that the people of Palestine benefit from their entire neighborhood as well. We hope many other countries will join the case that South Africa has put before the International Court, because we want to create a global community that is concerned about ending oppression of others, about ending occupation of others, about ending neocolonialism in all its forms. After all, it was the world community that played a role in our own anti-apartheid struggle at an international level. It was civil society organizations. It was associations of religious groupings. It was youth formations, academics. All of us need to be offended at what we are seeing today. And that offense must lead to action on behalf of the people of Palestine. South Africa, led by President Ramaphosa, is playing a very important role on the international stage in advancing the cause of human rights, of international law, and international humanitarian law. Some people would say that by taking the action we did not achieve a change. But I believe what we did place before the international global opinion is the injustice that is being brought to bear against the people of Palestine. We revealed the pain. We made it visible. The impunity of Israel toward Palestinian people was made so public to the world. President Ramaphosa has confirmed that South Africa will continue with the case that is before the ICJ and will always continue with its support for the just struggle of the people of Palestine.
Where those who have escaped death and injury now risk losing their lives because of a lack of food, safe water, medicine and healthcare. Gaza has, in her words, become a moral stain on the conscience of our collective humanity.
We will not waver in our commitment to the Palestinian people and their quest for self-determination. Our own painful history obliges us to do no less. We thank the International Court of Justice for upholding its role of achieving justice, promoting peace, preventing genocide, and holding those responsible for genocide to be accountable. It is our earnest hope and wish that this court order paves the way for an end to this crisis and this painful experience that Palestinians are going through.
Because as you know, they have a very different message with respect to Ukraine. And so the impression being given is that there are lives that are more worthy of concern than others. And this is wrong. All human life must be respected. All human life should be protected. And I think what we are asking the most powerful in the world is to be fair, to use power for the good. Because we do know that they have immense power, even over South Africa, over a lot of Africa. And that awareness does not mean that our countries shouldn't have a free voice on foreign policy, nor does it mean that our countries should countenance oppression or support for oppression anywhere in the world. And sometimes I'm dismayed at the notion that because you're powerful, what you believe is what must be operational in the world. I think that what we have developed through the United Nations system are frameworks of human rights, frameworks of how we protect the innocent. And I believe it's the obligation, particularly of those countries that are permanent members of the Security Council, to ensure that these frameworks, that these ideals that we have appropriated as humanity are respected by all nations and are pursued with vigor by the most powerful and not expected to be pursued only by the weakest. In my time as minister, I was really fortunate in my various roles, because I had several ministries, to be involved in a number of important, I think, advances that our government led in South Africa. First among these, I always appreciate, is the fact that it was the democratic government that introduced compulsory education. Second, President Mandela and President Mbeki committed very strongly to the presence of science in our society. And I had the opportunity to play a role as Minister of Science and Technology. But I think if there hadn't been that political leadership, our country would not have invested as much as it has done in science and innovation. And these, for me, are important attributes for the development of a society. Really believe science and innovation are so important for our continent, Africa. And for the developing world, the South, broadly, was convinced of this many, many decades ago. But it has been intensified by our experience during the COVID-19 pandemic, when Africa was denied access initially to vaccines and didn't have the ability to produce its own vaccines. If we had invested sufficiently in innovative capacity, we would have been able to produce vaccines for ourselves. So I believe science is so critical to development. And what I would love to see in the future is that our countries, especially on the African continent, would invest in higher education, would invest in excellent research, would invest in innovation capacity. I also am very appreciative of the efforts that have been made by the African Union. And I'm so glad that it was when our President Ramaphosa was chair of the African Union that we adopted the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And that this agreement, which will establish free trade among African nations, is an agreement that is going to give effect to significant industrialization and productive capacity on the African continent, and will set in place a new economic era for Africa if we ensure that we implement the AfCFTA effectively. What I have learned, really, having been given the privilege of leading ministries, is that one, you must recognize it's not a privilege, it's a privilege rather. It's not something that you arrogantly assume gives you power to wield over others. You should ensure that you are exercising your role with integrity. I think we've had a serious problem in many countries across the world of corruption and negative use of public resources. It is something I totally detest. And I believe that one of the things we should always look for are public representatives who are committed to exercising honesty and integrity. I learned these lessons from my home, and I believe people who are corrupt and who steal from the public purse, they were not brought up with honesty as part of their makeup of attributes. So we need to promote integrity even in education and not assume that everybody knows how they should behave with public resources. The time has come that we stop being rich in mineral resources and poor in economic ability. I believe Africa must now look at how it can add value to its rich mineral resource wealth and ensure that the people of Africa are the primary beneficiaries of the mineral wealth that nature has granted to us so richly. Being in exile taught me that you have to expect to deal with a multiplicity of situations. So, it taught me variety and the ability to deal with complex contexts, but also it taught me hard work, because to survive, as it were, in exile, you had to be committed, you had to work hard, and you had to be ready to be faced by, huge difficulties. Sometimes no money, at times no clothes, shoes. So there was a time we didn't have shoes, but you just knew that you have to keep going. You've got to have the resolute intention to continue on. I think sometimes some people have too easy a life and so don't appreciate the need to work hard and to strive to achieve.